wonderful to be here with you again. And don't you like the theme, pray, vote, and stand? It's so vitally important right now at this juncture in our country. Now, before I go on any further, you know these days everybody likes to make disclaimers. And I'm on this board, I serve with this group, so you have to take everything with a grain of salt. Well, I have a disclaimer, and it is that I am not politically correct. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm mean or trying to insult people, because I don't. I go out of my way not to do that. But I also found out that it's not worth tying yourself into a little pretzel so that you don't offend anybody, because today people are offended so easily. Have you noticed that? It's just crazy. And, you know, when I was a kid, they had a saying, sticks and stones may break my bones, but names never. I don't think the kids know that anymore. They don't teach that to them anymore. They say, if somebody says something to you, go to your safe space. You know? The whole thing has changed. But we can't let it change too much, because freedom of speech is such an important part of the American dream. And have you noticed that America is the only country that has a dream? There's no French dream. There's no Portuguese dream, no Nigerian dream, no Canadian dream. The Canadians thought they had one until recently, but we're the only ones. We're the only ones who actually have a dream, that shiny city on the hill. And how many people are trying to denigrate our country and say what a horrible place it is? What do they know? I mean, my wife and I have been to 68 different countries. We've lived overseas. And I can guarantee you that there is no place that compares with our country. It is the best place. And it's our job to maintain that dream for others. You know, a lot of people have given up on the dream. They say, I just want to survive because of all the things that are going on in our country right now. It's the same country, the same people, but we have had injected into our midst some who want to fundamentally change our country. And that is a big issue. But my American dream was to be a doctor. It was the only thing that interested me as a little kid. I loved anything that had to do with medicine. Dr. Kildare, Dr. Kinsey. I was all over that stuff. And I even liked going to the doctor's office. I mean, I would gladly have a shot just so I could smell the alcohol sponge. Well, maybe not a COVID shot. But obviously, if you're going to be a doctor, you got to go to medical school. And I was a terrible student. I was the worst student you could imagine. Everybody called me horrible names and teased me all the time. I admired smart kids. And there was one kid, his name was Steve. He was the smartest kid in the class. He wanted to make sure you do that. After a test, he'd come up to you and hold his A in your face and say, let me see yours, let me see yours. You wanted to let him see it all right. But you'd get into trouble for that. But, you know, my mother was such an amazing person. She believed in me when nobody else did. She was always saying, Benjamin, you're much too smart for being on grades like this. I brought him home anyway, but she was always saying that. And, you know, she was encouraging. She had had less than a third grade education herself. And she prayed to God for wisdom, because she wanted us to have a different life. And she knew that it was surrounding education, because the homes that she cleaned as a domestic, they had a lot of books. She noticed that they read a lot of books. They didn't watch a lot of TV, so she came home and imposed that on me and my brother. not happy campers. I mean, in today's world, we would have called social services. They'd probably have led her away in handcuffs, you know. But we had to read the books. And I didn't enjoy that at all, at first. But after a while, I actually began to enjoy reading those books. Started reading about entrepreneurs and innovators and explorers and surgeons and scientists. And as I read their stories, it became very clear to me that the person who has the most to do with what happens to you is you. It's not somebody else. It's not some circumstance. I stopped listening to all of those people who were saying, you can't do it. The situation is difficult for someone like yourself. There's too many obstacles. And also my mother. My mother was an incredible person. She never made excuses, no matter what was going on. And she never accepted excuses from us. And if we ever had an excuse, the very next thing out of her mouth was a poem called Yourself to Blame. And we didn't want to hear that poem. So we stopped making excuses. I think that was a very cool thing. But I got to the place where I was just reading. If I had 5 minutes, I was reading a book. And in the space of a year and a half, I went from the bottom of the class to the top of the class, much to the consternation of all those people who teased me and called me dummy. And I remember going up to Steve. After the test, and I said, Steve, how'd you do on the test? And he poked out his chest and said, I got a 91. I said, well, gee, that's too bad. I got 100. Next time if you need help, let me know. Yeah, I was probably a little obnoxious, but it sure felt good to say that. But you know what? I had the exact same brain when I was at the bottom of the class that I had at the top of the class. What does that tell you about potential? We are made in the image of God, and God is no dummy. He gave us these amazing brains that remember everything you've ever seen, everything you've ever heard, can process more than 2 million bits of information in 1 second. The human brain is the most amazing thing in the universe. And yet, have you noticed how there are forces in our society today that are trying to take advantage of that developing human brain? They're trying to take advantage of our children. You know, the brain develops incredibly rapidly after conception. Hundreds of thousands of neurons every single day. And the brain continues to develop into the mid to late 20s. So that's the reason that someone who's 15 years old doesn't get a driver's license. They don't quite process things the way that a fully mature individual does. The more mature they get, obviously, the better they process things. But can you imagine taking advantage of grade school children whose brains haven't developed, who are very suggestible and very curious? And then you go up to them and tell them you may not be a girl or a boy. And it has a much bigger impact on them than it would on somebody who has a mature brain. That's the very reason that God gave children parents, to protect them. And you know, some people think that all of this is of recent origin, all of these crazy things that are going on in our society. But it's been going on for a while. I want to read you something that comes from the Congressional Record, January the 10th, 1963. We're talking more than 60 years ago. These are the remarks of the Honorable A.S. Herlong, Jr. of Florida, and these are the current, at that time, communist goals for America. Number 15, capture one or both of the political parties in the United States. Seems like they've done a good job there. Number 17, get control of the schools. Use them as transmission belts for socialism and current communist propaganda. Soften the curriculum, get control of teachers' associations, put the party line in textbooks. Number 20, infiltrate the press. Get control of book review assignments, editorial writing, policy-making positions. Gain control of key positions in radio, TV, motion pictures. Think about that. Number 32, support any socialist movement to give centralized control over any part of the culture, education, social agencies, welfare programs, mental health clinics. Number 40, discredit the family as an institution. Encourage promiscuity and easy divorce. Emphasize the need to raise children away from the negative influence of parents. Attribute prejudices, mental blocks, and retarding of children to suppressive influence of parents. Does any of that stuff sound familiar? This is all the things that are happening in our society today. We think we won the Cold War, but they had a longer plan. And that's why Khrushchev said to Eisenhower, your grandchildren's children will live under communism, and we won't have to fire one shot. We see it happening all around us. And it's very important, I think, for the American people to recognize that we're being played. And we are not each other's enemies. But there are those who are making us think that we're each other's enemies by driving wedges between us on the basis of race, income, age, gender, political affiliation, religion, you name it. Drive the wedge, make them enemies, destroy their society. Fix it so that everybody will say, this system doesn't work, therefore we need something else. That, I believe, is the reason that we have all of these district attorneys who are funded by nefarious sources, who are allowing horrendous things to happen in our society so that everybody will say, this doesn't work. And we'll have other people saying, we got to get their guns. You know, there's too much criminal activity with the guns. Don't they realize that that's a violation of the Second Amendment? And people say, think about this, they say, you don't need a high-powered weapon for deer hunting or for duck hunting. How many times have you heard that? That just tells you they don't understand what the Second Amendment is. It's not about deer hunting, it's about being able to protect yourself from an overly aggressive government. Yeah. That's what people need to understand. But the other issue that is so serious is the educational issue. Some of you probably saw the report about 5 months ago, the Baltimore schools. They were following 23 public schools in Baltimore, assessing them for children who could perform math at grade level, elementary, middle, and high schools. Out of thousands of kids that were assessed, the number who could perform math at grade level, 0. And it's not unique to Baltimore. We're seeing this across the country. But you know what? This is not a new phenomenon. This has occurred historically in other countries too, particularly before they became socialist and communist countries. It's called dumbing down the population. Because if people are ignorant, it's easy to tell them anything. You've probably seen some of those man on the street interviews, haven't you? Where they ask them just basic stuff like, who fought in the Civil War? They're like, France? I mean, they have no idea. It must hurt to be that ignorant. But the fact of the matter is, people can tell you anything when that's the case. Someone can come up to you and say, Bidenomics really works. And you're actually better off than you were before, and your dollar actually goes further. You gotta be pretty stupid to believe that. But that's why you dumb people down. You can tell them there's no problem at the border, even though there are thousands, if not millions, of people streaming across, some of whom are dangerous people, some of whom are terrorists. I mean, if Iran, who thinks that we're the great Satan, is not sending its operatives through those open borders to wreak havoc upon us, then they would be guilty of terrorist malpractice. I'm sure they are sending people over here to do with that. But you know what it's going to require for us to get back on the right track? Courage. It's going to require us to understand what our history is. This is a country that was founded on Judeo-Christian values and principles. Our founding document, the Declaration of Independence, says that our rights come from God and not from government. And it is us. If our system is going to be fixed, it is going to be we the people. The government's not going to fix it, because the governments do what governments do. Our founders do that. Benjamin Franklin and the whole group, they studied every governmental system that had ever existed. And what they discovered is that no matter how they start, no matter how benign they are, they all migrate to the same place. Growth, infiltration, and domination. That's what they do. And that's why they work so hard to give us a constitution that will prevent that from happening in this country. And it's important that people understand what that Constitution is, the rights that it provides for us. And we have to hold people's feet to the fire, and we have to vote the right way. We can't continue to vote irresponsibly. People go into the voting booth and they just look for the name that looks familiar. It could be Satan. In some cases it is. They just keep putting those people in office, you know. That's not responsible voting. And people have to hold officials' feet to the fire. You can't let people say, well, you can monitor the voting, but you have to be way over there where you can't see what's going on. Or signatures don't have to match, or the addresses don't have, you can't just accept that. You know, we have to be vigilant, and we have to protect the integrity of the process. That's the role of the people. And we have to be courageous. And where does courage come from? It comes from God. And think about Fort McHenry in the War of 1812 when the British were there. And they said, we're going to knock that fort down and we're going to get that flag down. And the bombs were bursting in air and their rockets were going and they thought they were going to win. But our soldiers were so determined. They worked so hard, they did not let that flag go down. The British finally gave up and went home. That's who we are as Americans. And we must remember, if we're going to be the land of the free, we must also be the home of the brave. Thank you. God bless you.